I grew 20 different types of tomato varieties this year in the garden just to see which ones could handle all of the heat here in Florida. I'm going to share with you the top 5 that did the best, a couple honorable mentions, and one that I absolutely will never grow in my garden ever again. And I think it's probably going to surprise you. So we're going to start with the beefsteak tomatoes, and I have 2 that did decent, okay? So the first one is this guy right here. The tomatoes aren't completely done growing yet. They're a rather small beefsteak in my opinion, but they did produce quite a few tomatoes, and I do think that I'm gonna get a harvest before the bugs really start attacking these guys. And this is a better boy. The other one that I did was called a brandy boy, and let's take you over there so you guys can take a peek at it. I think it did a little bit better, and it's a little more impressive in terms of the size of the tomatoes. And that's this guy right here. As you can see, there is a lot of tomatoes in this. You can see them up here, you can see them down there, and if we look up even higher, there's even more. And these are about more of the size that I expect from a beefsteak tomato. That's a pretty good sized tomato. Nothing super beautiful about it or anything, but it's a big tomato. And there's quite a few of them on here. So we're gonna pick the ones off that have some blush so that the pests don't eat them. And this one you can see something bit into it. I did have a little bit of like I think it was baby hornworms, the tomato hornworm. I think that was the pest that was on here, but they were babies. They weren't big yet. The adults tend to eat the leaves, but the babies were burrowing into the actual tomato. So I took care of that by giving the plants a little bit of spinoside just to get rid of that little population that was here. And that seems to have done the trick, but I do have a couple of these. So I'll let it finish ripening and then I'll cut that spot off and we'll just use it like normal. The worm I don't believe is still in there. Usually they bite and then they leave. Now let's talk about my favorite slicer, because this one is outstanding. The best slicer by far was a variety called Kewolo, K-E-W-O-L-O. And this was recommended to me, as well as many of these were recommended to me by you guys. I did a video a while ago. Well, actually, I think it was exactly a year ago, saying the top 5 varieties that I grew in my garden that year. And you guys came back with a ton of ones for me to try. And so I bought a bunch of seeds and I tried a bunch of them. And some of them have worked out and some of them haven't. Well, the Kewolo, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, that one worked out. Check out these tomatoes, guys. For a slicer, they're pretty substantial. And they have tomatoes all the way up this plant. You can see them right in here. There's some more baby ones right there, and I still have flowers that are pollinating all the way up at the top. It's a Hawaiian variety, so I'm not like super surprised that it can handle the heat. I'm pleasantly surprised, I guess, that it can handle all of our humidity. But it is from Hawaii, so I guess it's pretty cool that they like our heat down here in Florida. This is a rather substantial tomato. This is a good size slicer, and taste-wise, I have enjoyed them quite a bit. They're really just a cute tomato. I have one that's super big right here. I've been wanting to pick this one for days. We do not leave our tomatoes on the vine here. I mean, some people do, I guess. I don't. I pick them off when they're like this, then I put them in my basket, and within a week, they'll be ready to go. So Kewolo, definitely get you some Kewolo. My next favorite for the list is going to be my favorite paste tomato, and that is going to be, surprise, surprise, San Marzano. You know, honestly, I've grown San Marzano in the past and didn't have as much luck as I did with it this year. This plant was covered. I've been picking them off. I couldn't let them stay because they were ripening so fast. And there's so many tomatoes up this plant. Like, wow, there's a lot. And so this one is by far my favorite paste tomato. It's a more traditional variety, which kind of surprised me because I expected to have to find, you know, something more exotic, maybe something from a tropical area like Hawaii, or something like that. Now, I will say the thing that I didn't like the most about this one is that they were especially prone to a lot of bug damage. I don't know why the bugs really went after these more than they went after any other tomato that I grew, but they really, really loved the San Marzanos in terms of pests, and you can see it here. Almost every single one of them has the worm damage, and it is right next to that tomato that had that hornworm damage, where the baby hornworms were. So maybe it was just coincidence that it just happened to be planted right next to the one that did have some, but it didn't, those worms didn't go after the other tomatoes. They only went after this one. So I don't know. But there is another one that I grew for a paste tomato that I think is equally as interesting, but maybe not as productive. And that's going to be this one over here. It's not super productive. Here, let me make sure you can see it very well. Okay, it's this one. It's called the Heart of Sambora, S-A-M-B-O-R-O. And it's just starting to blush a little bit. But what I want to show you is how big these paste tomatoes are compared to their counterparts. This is one of the smaller Heart of Sombros, and then this one, let me see if I can squeeze in there right next to it, is the difference in size between the San Marzano on the left here and the Heart of Sombro on the right. Now, with that being said, there's not a whole lot of other tomatoes. They are setting a little bit of fruit up there. This is from a tomato next to it. It didn't produce that much. Because it didn't produce that much, it's not my #1 pick, but I definitely am going to give it some focus next year. Maybe give it a little bit more room. I might have planted it a little bit too close to the edge of my bed, which maybe means it heats up faster the roots. I'm not sure, but if I can get these to grow in abundance, it's going to take a lot less tomatoes to make some sauce with these giant, giant paste tomatoes. For cherry tomatoes this year, I grew 2 varieties. I tried to grow 2 varieties, and that's going to be the Juliet, which is technically, I think, a grape tomato, and then the chocolate sprinkle. Now, the problem that I faced was this is a brand new supplier of seeds. I've never actually bought seeds from them before. They reached out to me, told me that they would love if I would help, you know, promote their product or whatnot, but I never promote any kind of product whatsoever. I never get into a relationship with anybody unless I've tried their product and I absolutely love it. So I don't absolutely love it. So I won't mention their name or anything like that, but these are supposed to be Juliets. Let me get to the point here. These are supposed to be Juliet tomatoes. Juliet tomatoes are like a grape tomato that has like a pointed tip on the bottom. This is not a Juliet tomato. And you know, one could say maybe it was my fault, maybe I mixed it up, but I really only grew 2, the chocolate sprinkle and the Juliet. Those are the only 2 small tomatoes I grew. Well, there's one other, but it's a Currant style tomato. So these were the only like grape cherry styles that I grew. So one could say, hey, maybe they messed up one seed, right? Wrong. They not only messed up the Juliet, they messed up the chocolate sprinkle as well. So let's make our way through this little tomato forest we have here. Let me show you the chocolate sprinkle. And if you're unfamiliar with chocolate sprinkles are kind of like how they sound. They are supposed to be like a brownish color. This is supposed to be the chocolate sprinkle from that same brand, or that same seed provider. That is clearly not a chocolate sprinkle. And interestingly enough, it kind of looks like whatever that is that was supposed to be the Juliet. So unfortunately, I didn't get to try any special new cherry tomato varieties this year because all the ones that were sent to me ended up being some other variety. I don't know what kind of variety this is. I've tried them. They're okay. There's nothing to write home about. You know, they're a cherry tomato. They taste a little bit bland to me. They're highly productive. I wish I could tell you what they are. I don't know what they are. But I will tell you that since we weren't able to grow a cherry tomato that I know exactly what it is, I'm going to revert back to my now favorite cherry tomato variety for you, which is going to be the large red cherry tomato. I know it sounds like such a super generic name, but the large red cherry tomato grew for me amazingly during the fall, and I wish I would have planted it instead of these guys, but hindsight's 2020, right? Anyway, that creates a very large cherry tomato, and it became hugely productive for me this last fall. I will forever grow that tomato. Once again, it's nothing to write home about in terms of taste. So if you're really going after a good taste, I would go with the Super Sweet 100. But if you're going after quantity, if you're just eating a lot of cherry tomatoes, the large red cherry tomato is really going to do it. And on top of that, they're called large red cherry tomatoes because they are large, and I mean big. Now the next one on my list is this guy right here, and this is a Currant style tomato. Well, it was supposed to be a Currant, and a Currant style tomato is traditionally very, very small. This is what I would consider maybe a small cherry tomato. It is supposed to be a Currant style, and it is called the Honeycomb Hybrid. I really think it's cool in terms of the color. It's this really cool purple, or I'm sorry, it's this really cool orange color, and it does have what I wanted, which are these long cascading trellises or trusses of tomatoes, and they are productive. I mean, they are all over this plant. So it is highly, highly productive. The downside of this particular variety, at least for me, is that while it does have that cascade look I was looking for, and it's got that cool color look, it doesn't have that crazy intense taste that most Currant tomatoes have. If you've ever grown an Everglades tomato, you'll know that they are very tasty. My favorite is not Everglades, I know, which that is crazy. Everyone in Florida here absolutely loves Everglades. I find them okay, they're good. The one that I like better is the red Currant. The little red Currant is outstanding flavor-wise. Tiny, tiny tomato with absolutely amazing flavor. This guy didn't really hold up in terms of that amazing flavor. I was kind of hoping that since it was a hybrid and since it had this beautiful orange color that it would really knock my socks off. And while productivity-wise, yes, it's absolutely very productive. And it's bigger than what I thought. Some people would like that, some people wouldn't. The flavor isn't quite there. I would definitely return to the red Currant tomato in the future for my Currant style tiny tomatoes. I absolutely love the red Currants in salsas because it gives such an amazing flavor to the salsa. These guys, they're going to be a little more basic. So, great tomato, really cool looking, but I definitely would still go with the red Currant in the future. Now let's get into our honorable mentions. The first honorable mention, which I for sure thought was not going to do well, is the Blvd. I got this one from Baker's Creek. I thought, oh my gosh, it's such a gorgeous tomato, but there's no way it's going to do well here in Florida with our heat, our humidity, our disease. But honestly, it seems really disease resistant. On top of that, the tomatoes are gorgeous. I mean, this is what I'm looking for when I'm looking for a very unique tomato. And it has these pretty good clusters of tomatoes. They all pollinated pretty well. It took the plant quite a while. I mean, it got all the way up to here, about 3 feet tall, before it actually started producing any tomatoes. And since then, it's got another set of flowers up there that hopefully are going to take. But you can see there's some great big distances between the sets of flowers. So while it's not the most productive, and I haven't had a chance to taste it yet, it is definitely a really interesting and unique tomato if you want to give it a shot. The next honorable mention is this guy right here. I am so stoked to grow this tomato. Unfortunately, this is not a tomato that you can buy, so this isn't a seed that you're going to be able to get anywhere. I apologize, but I just wanted to point out how important it is to save your own seeds. So this tomato right here was given to me by a viewer on the channel. I'm calling it Donna's purple tomato. It's the only tomato I've ever been able to grow successfully that is a purple tomato variety. It's not looking quite purple right this minute, but you can kind of start to see that purple color taking hold right here. Cherokee purple would be another one, but I never had success with it. This was a tomato that Donna from the channel got from a farmer's market where they grow it here in Florida. And it's, I don't know what it's from, but she saved the seeds from it, and she's been growing it in her garden over and over and over, and it has basically adapted to our Florida weather here. It does have a good amount of splitting, but other than, I mean, it's not deep splitting if you look closely. It's not super deep. It's just kind of surface area. This one's got a decent amount of deep splitting from rain and such, but it's got more tomatoes coming in right there. It's got some cat facing going on. It's got more flowers. Where are the flowers at? Here's some more flowers that are coming in that I believe were pollinated. So it's really handling our heat and humidity and wet weather very, very well. This is definitely an honorable mention. Make sure you guys are saving your seeds. It is so important to save your seeds because these plants, these tomatoes in particular, are adapting over time to our environment, and they are doing so beautifully. I'm so excited to grow them. I'm going to be saving seeds from these guys so I can continue to grow them. Now, the last tomato I want to talk about is this guy right here, which is the one that I will never grow again. This is the mortgage lifter tomato. Look at the size of this tomato plant. I mean, it is huge. It is bushy. It is green. It is holding out from the disease. And here's why I don't like it. It has absolutely just one tomato. That is it, one. And it took starting that one tomato all the way up here. I'm 5 foot. This is like probably 4 feet tall. And I'm looking at all of the flowers. And what I'm noticing is that a lot of the flowers, they won't pollinate. I have tapped them. I've used an electric toothbrush. I have done all the things to get these guys to pollinate. They are not pollinating. And they do have some flowers up here at the top. I'm going to tap, 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 see if I can get any of them to take, just so this is not a loss of space. Maybe it was waiting for hotter weather. That isn't usually typical here in Florida. But everyone swears by these mortgage lifters here in Florida as a beefsteak tomato, and I'm not sold. This is my second time growing them, and each time this is the result that I've gotten. So I'm not a fan. I will never grow them again. I'm going to give them the best shot that I can right now, but we're almost done here. So in Florida season, once the temperatures get to about 90 degrees and they're consistently at 90 degrees, the flowers on these tomatoes are not going to pollinate. They get sticky, tacky, and they will not release the pollen properly, and all the flowers will just start to die. It doesn't mean you have to pull the plant. Leave the plant so that you get all the tomatoes that are on the plant off. So make sure that they finish ripening and everything before you actually take the tomato out of the ground. Just because the flowers are not pollinating doesn't mean that the plant is not continuing to ripen all the rest of the tomatoes on the plant. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll tap, tap, tap these flowers for a couple more days, even though we are hitting 90 degrees almost every single day. And I'll watch to see, number one, which one of these plants will still pollinate the flowers into the 90-degree range, because that's going to be a winner through summer, and which ones give up. Once they've given up, I will top the plant. Just cut the top of it clear off, give up on those top flowers, and just let those tomatoes ripen below. Anything that is still pollinating tomatoes is going to stay in my garden until it stops pollinating tomatoes and all the tomatoes ripen. So those were all of the tomato varieties that I absolutely loved this season. I'm going to continue to experiment. I will make sure to go down into the description of this video and put all of the names of the tomato varieties, including where I got them from, in the description below so that you can pick them up too. I hope you had fun hanging out with me picking a bunch of tomatoes, and we have even more left to pick. Happy gardening, guys!